Is it possible to pattern a whitetail deer? That's a question that's been asked as long as hunters have gone to the woods. But can it be done, especially when the pattern likely changes throughout the season? Or are the deer patterning you?
Trust me, most deer have a lot easier time patterning the hunter than us hunters ever have for patterning them.
You got to know that those deer are watching you just as much as you're watching them.
I'm Steve Bartella.
I'm Gordy Cron.
I'm Mark Kaiser.
I'm Dan Schmidt, and this is Deer and Deer Hunting TV.
I think you got it out.
Every deer hunter pretty much knows the drill. Deer come out and move at dusk and dawn. But every deer hunter also knows someone who took the buck of a lifetime during the middle of the day. A hunter can drive themselves crazy trying to predict deer movements in the fall.
What we're trying to hope for, we're trying to find those one or two things that the deer tend to do. If we can pick up one or two of their daylight tendencies, now all of a sudden we can try to game plan whether we can take advantage of that or not.
Their behavior in fall is a lot different than it is in spring and summer. And you have to understand how they transition from period to period to know what they're going to be doing and when hunting season rolls around.
Deer movements change many times during the season, but we're going to look at three: early season, the rut, and post-rut. Starting with early season, Dan Schmidt is in Minnesota, hunting the bluffs that contain some really nice bucks.
What we were hunting was really good farmland in the bluff country of southeastern Minnesota. But these deer were very pressured, and we knew that killing an adult buck, in this case a nice 8-pointer, was going to be about as good as we could get. It was tough hunting, don't get me wrong, but we had patterned some deer. We were hunting over a newly created turnip plot. When people think of turnips, they usually think of later in the season. Well, in southeast Minnesota, these deer were really hammering. As in the case of most things with deer hunting, it comes down to three things: food availability, wind direction, and stand placement. And on this particular afternoon, we had all three of those things going in our favor. So the buck is out there. We know he's coming, but he's testing the wind and he's smart. He comes out of the woods, inches his way along, stops, looks, flicks his tail, swivels his ears. He's testing. He's gonna come, but it's gonna take some time. And that's, for me as a deer hunter, that's when I get really excited, because whether it's a buck or a doe, the minute I know that that's a deer I wanna shoot, that's when my heart just jumps into overdrive. And I was so excited as this deer is approaching me, because I know this is a deer I wanna take. This is a really nice deer. I wanna take him, but is he gonna get to me in time? Is he gonna present a shot? You know, am I gonna get the shot? Is he gonna see me? Is he gonna smell me? All these things are going through my mind in just milliseconds as he approaches. But as he approaches, we realize it's gonna happen. I pull that arrow back, the fletchings are to my lips, and release the shot.
I think I just heard him go down.
And that's the beauty of hunting pressured areas, especially public land. This was not public land. It was surrounded by a lot of small parcels, a nice farm, but a lot of times you're hunting deer that you don't know are there.
God, oh my heart is just shaking right now.
A lot of times, especially when you're going in there on the fly like we were in this situation, you're kind of going in there by chance. And that's what makes you a better hunter, is when you can do that, when you can go into an area like this and set up your stand and have a food source and analyze wind directions you're gonna put yourself in the position for success, but it's almost like Christmas morning when that deer shows up. It's like, hey, that's a deer we're after. We did everything right and he came into that food source without knowing we were there. That's the payoff. That's where you really hone your skills as a deer hunter.
There's a nice 8-pointer. Oh, he fell right in this tree. That's what we heard. He's got that real red in his forehead. Just an absolutely glorious afternoon.
Deer and Deer Hunting Television is brought to you by Matthews Archery. Catch us if you can. Carbon Express. Shoot better with Carbon Express. Scent Killer Gold with Hunt Dry Technology. Apply, dry it, and go hunt. And by Nikon, the next generation of hunting optics.
You can pattern bucks during the rut. As a matter of fact, lots of times their patterns are more tight during the rut than any other time outside of possibly late season. You're watching Deer and Deer Hunting TV.
Trying to pattern a whitetail deer can drive a hunter crazy. Just when you think you have everything figured out, here comes the rut. All bets are off, or so it seems.
Everybody knows you can't pattern bucks during the rut. You know it because we've been told it over and over and over and over. Frankly, that's baloney. You can pattern bucks during the rut. As a matter of fact, lots of times their patterns are more tight during the rut than any other time outside of possibly late season.
There are 3 key areas you can use. First, you always want to hunt does. So no matter where you're at, you want to find that big concentration of does. Second thing, find the food. And when you find that food, lots of times you're going to find those does. The third area you really want to focus on, you need to find the best refuge or sanctuary in your area.
Mark Kaiser's favorite time to hunt whitetail is during the rut, for good reason.
This hunt takes place in the open country of South Dakota, but it's not as open as you would think. I was sitting there kind of kicked back. I had a buck bedded across from me in a little thicket in the shade out of the sun, and that's where all the does were. That's where I set up my ambush, pinching him between the cover he was in and where he wanted to be. Again, the elements of does and food. I already had him trapped in his bedding and refuge cover, and where would he try to slip out? There was only one little avenue with a couple of back doors where he could slip out, but I set up an overwatch to make sure he didn't get past me when the sun set. And right above that bedded buck, a doe ran. And guess what come out right behind him? This is high noon. Mr. Big, that big, heavy 5x5. He comes shooting down that hill right on the trail of that doe. It was hot. It was 70-some degrees, but it was a classic rutting move. Midday chasing. The shot at that point was well over 400 yards, something I just didn't want to do on this hunt. Not to mention they were buried in the thick cedars. And at that minute, when I decided I was going to have to start crawling, the 2 does made a classic escape move and left. And the big buck was all alone. He even looked a little confused. What do I do now? And instead of following those 2 does, he stayed in the creek bottom, just like a big mature buck would, just like you would think he would. I started looking at my watch, timing it, and making sure he was down for the count. I just didn't know what to do. I figured if I backed out and went up high again, he might have a chance to see me. I decided that it was best just to get on my belly and slither through the grass, get to another high point, and wait him out. Now he had one little escape route, one little ravine he might be able to escape, but I figured even then that would top out at 200 yards, and at that point I should be able to have an uphill shot at him. Then the big wait came. You know the patience thing I keep talking about? Patience, patience, patience. Well, I had almost 5 hours of patience, and it was tough. I was laying out in the hot sun. He had the beautiful, cool shade of a dirt bank there to lay behind. Not me. The sun was beating down on me. I'm laying in the sharp, pointed, dry grass. I looked at my watch and I figured he'd probably get up sometime after 5 o'clock. Well, at 5:10, I got a surprise. Out in front of me, not where I thought he was, there he walked. He had gotten down into the cattails, slid along the bank, completely out of sight, and he just looked around, mainly staring in my direction. After a few minutes, and trust me, they were long, long minutes, he finally turned broadside and gave me the shot. I felt good about the shot. When I lost the buck in the whole chaos of the recoil, I didn't know if he went right down. I didn't see any whitetails flagging anywhere. So I grabbed my gear, hustled over as fast as I could, because I don't want any wounded animal getting away. And when I started digging through the cattails, I found a pretty darn good prize. It's right there. I hate to say it, but this guy deserved that for making me lay up on this hill all day long. It was a long day, but well worth it when you get to hold mass like this and all this body mass to go with it. Whew. Now some people say you can't pattern deer during the rut. I disagree. You can pattern deer during the rut. It might not be as predictable as in the pre-rut or the post-rut, but if you know these elements, does, food, refuge, sanctuary, you're gonna find a pattern. You just might have to wait a day or two for that buck to return after he's been out on a hot day.
Coming up next.
When you boil it all down, what patterning bucks really means is what does a buck want at a particular time of year. You're watching Deer and Deer Hunting TV. I'm not going to say whitetails are the smartest animal in the world, but they are instinctual. I mean, if you're careless about leaving your stand, you might see 20 deer in the field when you exit one night. 2 nights later, you might see 10 deer. By the end of the week, you might not see any deer at all. That's because these deer are learning from your behavior.
As the months move into winter and the weather gets colder, deer movements become a little more predictable, but it still requires a solid base of what is happening in that area.
You know, when we talk about patterning deer, most people are talking about those first few weeks of bow hunting season. That's one way of doing it, and that's how most people view it, is like, well, I'm going to get in there, I'm going to try to pinpoint the exact trail where he's coming out. It's a deadly tactic if you can pull it off. Some guys can do it, some guys can't, and then what happens? If you don't capitalize on that pattern, what do you know about the rest of his habitat? Did you even think that far? That's what you have to do. That's true patterning, is knowing where that buck is coming from, and can I get in there, or do I even want to try to get in there before he gets to that food source?
You have to understand what a buck has been through up to this point. A buck can lose as much as 25 to 30% body weight during the rut. Now when you're talking the Midwest and points north, they got to face winter. Winter is the low point for food over the entire year for that animal. And he's just lost that 25 to 30% body weight. He has to focus on food. You find those prime food sources, you observe them, you figure out where Mr. Big is entering and exiting that food source. If you can set up on him low impact, you set up on him low impact, you wait for the nastiest weather you can find, and you get in there and kill him.
Steve Bartilla is hunting Illinois late season. After watching these deer all season, he's got a good idea of what's happening now.
I really first started paying attention to Tweenie when he was 3 years old. That's when he got his name. At that point, he was about 140-inch, 3.5-year-old. He could either be an unbelievably great buck or a good one. He was a tweener between the two. Every time I looked at him, that's what came to mind. Every time we saw him, he got a free pass. That wasn't going to be the case in 2014, though. In 2014, he was at the very top of my hit list. Bottom corn plot that we left up for the deer. A ground blind tucked away in the back corner, very, very low impact getting in and out. There was a bunch of deer, there was a bunch of food. He'd been there, and I could get in and out without being detected. That is precisely why I was sitting there. I'm sitting there, I've got turkeys all around me, the does and young bucks are coming out. It's shaping up to be just one of those really nice days out in the woods, when all of a sudden out he stepped. I've got to be completely honest with you guys, I fell to pieces. I did. Just at an instant, I got more excited on this buck than I ever have on anyone I've ever tried to kill in my entire life. Luckily, he was quartered slightly towards me. Now, he'd repositioned in the time that it took me to gather myself. Take a deep breath. Take another one. Take another one. You've got the turkeys right out in front of your blind. You've got other deer out there. Your only way you're going to blow this is if you blow it yourself by being too excited. So calm down. Then, finally, he changed his angle just enough that I believed I could make the shot. I took a deep breath. I zeroed in on a hair, and I pulled the trigger, and thankfully I made the shot. I just shot the biggest buck of my life. I've been after this deer all season long. I'm going to take a deep breath here, and we're going to go and get an up close and personal look at Tweenie. He's a 5.5-year-old buck. Whew, thanks, big guy. At that point, it was just, I was very happy. This was a buck that I'd hunted all through bow season and into firearms, and you know what? It all came together, and I was beyond thrilled. Check this bad boy out. Quite honestly, it's the biggest buck I've ever shot in my life. You know.
Deer and Deer Hunting TV is brought to you by Mossberg. Built rugged, proudly American. By Cuddyback, more deer, fewer blanks. Hunter's Safety Systems, saving lives is what we do. By Analogics, protect your herd with the power of science. And by Block Vault, get locked in. Perfect your setup and grow them big. Here's Steve Bartillo.
Most everybody thinks ultimately the most important thing is to grow big bucks, but the more you delve into it, the more you ask specific questions, the more you realize that no, that's not the case. What's really the case is, one person wants to enjoy their property with their children. Another has a bunch of buddies they want to have come hunt with them. What's your budget? What is the amount of money you can go ahead and spend on this property? How about man hours? Habitat improvement is very much like being a carpenter. A carpenter has a whole big tool chest to choose from. In habitat improvement, there's all sorts of different improvements that we can choose from. A carpenter isn't going to use every single tool just to go ahead and finish a project. Just to say, man, I used my tools. The same thing applies to habitat improvement. Many tools are not right for that property. The key is to determine which ones are. How do you do that? You set goals. Answer your questions honestly, define those goals, and all of a sudden the steps in how you come up with a plan starts to define ourselves.
If you're spending a lot of your time shooting from the bench, you're probably killing a lot of paper, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be killing a lot of deer this fall. I think a lot of guys are content to sight in their rifle from the bench, punch a few groups, and then call it a day. They don't seem to realize it could cost them big if they're forced to take a shot in the field from a position they haven't practiced. While hunting, you should always try to use a shooting aid, such as shooting sticks, backpack, even a tree, anything to stabilize your firearm. But there'll be times when you have to act quickly and shoot without the aid of a rest, and that's why it's so important to master the various shooting positions with and without a rest, and then practice them at the range. The closer you are to the ground, the more stable your shooting position. So if visibility allows, the best option is prone, followed by sitting, kneeling, and standing. Here's a tip. Practice with the rifle you're going to be shooting this fall. For me, it's Mossberg's new Patriot. To shoot from the prone position, lie on your stomach with your body slightly to the left and your back straight. Your legs should be in a relaxed, spread position. Both elbows should be bent and your shoulders curved slightly forward to form a solid upper body position. For sitting, position your body about 30 degrees to the right and place the left elbow near, but not on the bony part of the left knee. Tucking the elbow as far under the rifle as possible. Place the right elbow on or near the right knee, forming two triangles to firmly support the rifle. For kneeling, line up at a 45-degree angle to the target and lower your body so that the right knee touches the ground and place your left foot forward. Sit comfortably on the heel or side of the right foot and place the left elbow near but not on the bony part of the left knee. When standing, position your body 90 degrees to the right of the target with your feet shoulder width apart. Support the rifle with your left arm, holding it against your body for extra support. Hold the rifle firmly against your shoulder with the right hand. I can tell you one thing for sure, you're not going to find one of these in the deer woods next fall. And that's why it's so important to get away from the bench and practice those money shots that are going to make you a better hunter.
Be sure to check deer and deer hunting out online and on Facebook.